The rain hammered against the windshield as the black SUV screeched to a halt outside the towering iron gates. Chiamaka's hands trembled as she yanked the door open before the driver could even put the car in park. Her designer heels sank into the wet gravel as she stumbled out, mascara already running down her cheeks, mixing with raindrops she couldn't tell apart from her tears anymore. She didn't care. She didn't care about the $1,000 dress clinging to her body or the diamond bracelet sliding loose on her wrist. All she cared about was reaching that gate before her courage failed her. "Emeka!" she screamed, slamming her palms against the cold iron bars. "Emeka, please. I need to talk to you." The massive gate began to creak open, and her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through skin and bone. Floodlights illuminated a compound that looked like something from a magazine, manicured lawns, marble fountains, security guards stationed like silent statues. And there, standing in the doorway of the mansion, was the man she had once called her husband. He looked different. Stronger. Calmer. Dressed simply in a white kaftan despite the wealth surrounding him, as if he didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Beside him stood a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, her arm wrapped protectively around two children who peeked curiously from behind their father's legs. Chiamaka's knees nearly gave out. "Please," she whispered, the word barely escaping her throat. "I made a mistake. I made the biggest mistake of my life." Emeka said nothing. He simply stared at her, his expression unreadable, as the rain continued to fall between them like a curtain separating two worlds that could never touch again. 5 years earlier, she had walked away from this same man believing she deserved better, believing that success had elevated her beyond him. She had no idea, back then, that the man she discarded so easily would become the greatest loss of her entire life. To understand how she arrived at this gate, broken and begging, one had to go back to where it all began, in a cramped one-room apartment in the heart of Lagos, where love existed without luxury, and happiness needed no permission from money. Chiamaka had always been ambitious. Even as a young girl selling second-hand clothes in the market with her mother, she dreamed of designing fabrics that would make people stop and stare. She was sharp-minded, quick with numbers, quicker with her tongue when she needed to negotiate a better price. Everyone who knew her said the same thing: that girl was going somewhere. Emeka, on the other hand, wanted simple things. A roof over his head, food on the table, and a wife who loved him. He drove a commercial bus through the chaotic streets of Lagos, waking before dawn and returning long after dark, his body aching from hours behind the wheel, his pockets often empty by the time he paid for fuel and feeding. They had married for love, plain and pure, with no dowry negotiations involving wealth or property, because neither of them had any. Their wedding had been small, held in Emeka's mother's backyard, with rented plastic chairs and a borrowed sound system that kept cutting off during the reception. But nobody who attended that day forgot how the couple looked at each other, how Chiamaka had laughed so hard at Emeka's terrible dance moves that she nearly fell off her chair, how he had carried her on his back through the muddy compound because her shoes got stuck. One day, she had told him that night, lying on a thin mattress in their tiny rented room, "I'm going to build something so big, Emeka. You'll see." "I already see it," he had replied, kissing her forehead. "I saw it the first day I met you. That fire in your eyes, that's not something that fades." Money was scarce in those early years. There were nights they shared a single plate of rice between them because that was all they could afford. There were evenings when the power went out for hours, and instead of complaining, they would sit by candlelight, Emeka humming old songs while Chiamaka sketched fashion designs on scraps of paper, dreaming of fabrics she couldn't yet afford to buy. "When I make it," she would say, holding up a sketch of an elaborate gown, "this one will be the first dress I sew with proper ankara, not these test patterns. And I'll be the one driving you to your first fashion show," Emeka would answer, grinning. They survived on dreams as much as on bread, and somehow that was enough. But dreams alone could not start a business. Chiamaka needed capital, sewing machines, fabric, a small shop space, something to launch what she had spent years imagining. She mentioned it cautiously one evening, almost apologetically, knowing they barely had enough for rent. What she didn't know is that Emeka had already been thinking about it for weeks. 3 days later, he came home and placed a thick envelope of cash on their wooden table. Chiamaka stared at it, then at him, confusion creasing her forehead. "Emeka, where did you get this?" He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly shy. "I sold my motorcycle." Her mouth fell open. That motorcycle was how he got to work faster on days the bus broke down. It was practically an extension of his own legs. And, he continued, avoiding her eyes, "I sold the television. And I emptied my savings account." "Emeka," she gasped, tears immediately filling her eyes. "That's everything you have." He took her hands in his calloused palms rough against her soft skin. "Chiamaka, listen to me. I don't need a television to be happy. I don't need a motorcycle if my wife's dream is parked at home, waiting to be set free. This is everything I have, yes, but it's not everything I am. You are going to succeed. I know it. And when that day comes," his voice cracked slightly, "please, don't forget where we started." She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "Never. I promise you, Emeka. Never." If only promises were as unbreakable as the moments that birthed them. The first year of the business was brutal. Chiamaka worked 20-hour days, sewing orders by hand, walking from shop to shop trying to convince boutique owners to stock her designs. Many doors closed in her face. Many nights she cried from exhaustion, wondering if she had wasted Emeka's sacrifice on a foolish dream. But slowly, something shifted. A local influencer wore one of her gowns to a wedding, and the photos went viral on social media. Comments flooded in asking where the dress came from. Orders began trickling in, then flooding in. Within 18 months, Chiamaka's small fashion label, which she had named Chi Designs, had transformed from a one-woman operation into a recognized brand with 12 employees. Celebrities started reaching out. A popular actress wore one of her designs to an award show, and overnight, Chiamaka's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Magazines wanted interviews. Brands wanted collaborations. The money that had once been so scarce now poured in faster than she could track it. At first, she remained the same woman Emeka had married. She would rush home excited, pulling him into the kitchen to show him photos of celebrities wearing her work. "Look, Emeka. Look at this. Can you believe it?" He would laugh, genuinely thrilled for her, kissing her cheek. "I told you. That fire in your eyes." They moved out of the cramped one-room apartment into a modest 3-bedroom house. Then, as the business exploded further, into a duplex in a gated estate. New cars replaced the old commercial bus Emeka had once driven for a living, though he insisted on still doing small driving jobs for friends, refusing to let success make him idle. But success, as it often does, began to invite new companies into their lives, and not all of it was kind. Chiamaka started attending elite fashion events, business summits, exclusive parties where champagne flowed and conversations revolved around stock portfolios and overseas real estate. She made new friends, polished women with foreign accents acquired from years abroad, women who wore their wealth like armor and judged everyone who didn't match their standard. Chiamaka, darling, one of them, a woman named Adiz, asked during a rooftop party, swirling wine in her glass, "What does your husband do again?" "He's into transportation and logistics," Chiamaka replied carefully, though the words felt strange leaving her mouth, as if she were dressing up a simpler truth in fancier clothing. Adiz raised an eyebrow. "Transportation? You mean like a driver?" The way she said the word driver made Chiamaka's skin prickle with embarrassment, though she quickly masked it with a forced laugh. "It's more complicated than that." Another woman chimed in, smirking. "Honestly, with your money now, you could do so much better. Men like Chief Kalechi have been asking about you, you know. A woman of your status shouldn't be settling." Chiamaka brushed off the comment that night, telling herself it meant nothing. But comments like that didn't disappear. They planted seeds, quiet and patient, waiting for the right conditions to grow into something poisonous. She began noticing things about Emeka that had never bothered her before. The way he spoke, simple and unpolished, lacking the international vocabulary her new friends used so effortlessly. The clothes he wore, comfortable but unfashionable compared to the tailored suits of the men she now mingled with. Even his laugh, once a sound that made her heart swell, started to feel embarrassingly loud in rooms filled with quiet sophistication. Their phone calls grew shorter. Their date nights, once sacred and untouchable, became easy to cancel for important business dinners. Emeka noticed the distance growing between them, the way Chiamaka's eyes would glaze over when he talked about his day, the way she would check her phone constantly during their dinners at home. But he remained patient, telling himself it was simply the pressure of running a growing business. He remembered the woman who had cried in his arms over a sewing machine she couldn't afford. He believed that woman still existed somewhere beneath the expensive clothes and busy schedule. He was wrong. The breaking point came during a major business award ceremony, an event celebrating the top emerging entrepreneurs in Lagos. Chiamaka had been nominated, and excitement buzzed through their house for days leading up to it. Emeka decided to surprise her. He arrived at the venue in his best suit, the same one he had worn to their wedding years ago, now slightly tight around the shoulders but pressed and clean. He carried a small bouquet of flowers, his heart swelling with pride as he imagined the look on her face when she saw him supporting her on such an important night. He found her standing near the stage, laughing with a group of glamorous men and women dressed in designer outfits that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe combined. "Chiamaka," he called out, waving, a wide smile spreading across his face. She turned, and for a split second, before she could control her expression, horror flashed across her face. The group around her fell silent, eyes darting between Emeka's slightly outdated suit and Chiamaka's frozen expression. "Who is this?" Adiz asked, her voice dripping with barely concealed mockery. Chiamaka swallowed hard, glancing at Emeka, then back at her friends, caught in a moment that revealed more about her heart than she ever intended. "He's my husband," she finally said, the words coming out reluctant, almost ashamed. Snickers rippled through the small crowd. One man muttered something about true love conquering class differences, with a tone that made it clear he meant the opposite. Emeka's smile faded slowly, like a candle being smothered by invisible hands. He had driven across the city, rehearsed sweet words of encouragement, brought flowers picked specifically because they reminded him of the bouquet from their wedding day. And in return, his wife had introduced him like an inconvenient secret. "Congratulations on your nomination," he said quietly, placing the flowers on a nearby table since she made no move to take them. "I'll wait for you outside." He left before she could respond, his heart cracking in ways that no business success could ever repair. That night marked the beginning of constant arguments at home. Chiamaka, perhaps fueled by guilt she refused to acknowledge, began directing her frustration toward Emeka instead. "Why do you still dress like that?" she snapped one evening, watching him change out of his work clothes. "We have money now, Emeka. You could at least try to look the part." "Look what part?" he asked, confusion knitting his brows. "I am who I am, Chiamaka." "That's the problem," she shot back. "You refuse to grow. You're still that bus driver from 5 years ago, content with mediocrity while I'm out there building an empire." The words sliced through him like glass. "I built that empire with you," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "I sold everything I owned so you could chase that dream. Don't you dare call my sacrifice mediocrity." She had no response for that, but the resentment didn't fade. If anything, it deepened, twisting into something uglier each day. It was during this fragile period that Chief Kelechi entered her life. He was everything her new social circle admired, wealthy beyond measure, owner of multiple businesses spanning oil, real estate, and telecommunications. Charming in a way that felt effortless, sophisticated in his speech, dressed impeccably in custom suits flown in from Italy. He began appearing at the same events Chiamaka attended, always finding subtle ways to complement her work, to offer business advice that proved remarkably useful, to send expensive gifts that arrived at her office with notes praising her brilliance. "You deserve a partner who understands your world," he told her one evening over dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Lagos skyline, dinner he had insisted on hosting to discuss a potential business collaboration. Someone who can walk beside you, not someone who makes you explain yourself constantly. Chiamaka should have recognized the manipulation in his words. Instead, exhausted from arguments at home and starved for validation from her new world, she let his words settle into the cracks Emeka's perceived inadequacy had created. The affair, though she never called it that in her own mind, started slowly. Business meetings that extended into dinners. Dinners that extended into late-night phone calls. Phone calls that became confessions about how unhappy she felt at home, how trapped she felt by a marriage that no longer matched her ambitions. Emeka wasn't blind. He noticed the new jewelry he hadn't bought, the perfume that lingered differently, the way she flinched when her phone buzzed during their dinners and quickly turned the screen away from him. He confronted her one night, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Chiamaka, what is happening to us?" She stared at him for a long moment, and then, with a coldness that shocked even herself, she said, "I've outgrown this marriage, Emeka." The room went silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioner. "We built everything together," he said, his voice breaking. "Every brick of this success, we built it together. How can you say you've outgrown me?" "I'm not the same woman you married," she replied, refusing to meet his eyes. "I've changed. I need someone who matches who I've become." "And who decided that person isn't me?" he asked, though deep down, he already suspected the answer. She said nothing. Divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. Emeka stared at them for a long time before signing, his hands shaking, his heart shattering into pieces he wasn't sure could ever be put back together. He had given this woman everything, his motorcycle, his savings, his entire youth, and in the end, success had convinced her that he was the one piece of her past not worth keeping. She moved out within the month, leaving behind a house filled with memories and a man drowning in heartbreak he hid from the world. What followed for Emeka was a period of darkness he never spoke about publicly. Nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, searching for the exact moment love had curdled into contempt. But grief, eventually, transformed into determination. He took the small settlement from the divorce and invested it carefully, studying logistics and transportation markets late into the night. Drawing on years of experience navigating Lagos traffic and understanding the city's transportation gaps better than any business school graduate could. He started small, 2 delivery vans and a handful of loyal drivers who believed in his vision. Within 2 years, his logistics company had secured contracts with major retailers across Lagos. Within 4 years, he was expanding into neighboring states, his name slowly becoming synonymous with reliability and innovation in an industry plagued by inefficiency. Meanwhile, Chiamaka's new life with Chief Kelechi began unraveling faster than anyone anticipated. The man who had seemed so perfect during courtship revealed darker layers once he secured her completely. He was controlling, demanding to know her whereabouts constantly, dictating which friends she could keep, which business decisions she could make without his approval. He was manipulative, twisting arguments until she questioned her own memory of events. And eventually, painfully, she discovered he was unfaithful, juggling multiple relationships with the same charm he had once directed solely at her. "You're lucky I even chose you," he told her coldly one night after she confronted him about a woman she'd seen him with. "Don't act like you're better than what you are." The words echoed Adi's old comments about Emeka, except now they were aimed at her, and they cut just as deep. Then came the scandal. Chief Kelechi's business empire, built on shaky foundations of fraud and over-leveraged investments, collapsed under government investigation. Assets were frozen. Investors fled. And Chiamaka, whose business had become financially entangled with his through joint ventures she hadn't fully understood, found her own company dragged into the wreckage. Orders stopped coming in. Boutiques that once proudly displayed her designs quietly removed them from their shelves. The same wealthy friends who had once celebrated her at rooftop parties now avoided her calls entirely, unwilling to associate with anyone connected to scandal. Within months, Chiamaka watched everything she had built crumble into dust. Alone in her now quiet apartment, stripped of the social circle that once made her feel important, she found herself scrolling through old photos one sleepless night. Pictures from years ago surfaced unexpectedly, a cracked phone screen capturing her and Emeka laughing in their tiny one-room apartment, candlelight flickering during a power outage, her sketching designs on scraps of paper while he hummed old songs beside her. Tears blurred her vision as she stared at those images, remembering a happiness that required no designer labels, no elite parties, no validation from strangers who only loved her when she had something to offer them. She finally understood, with painful clarity, that the love she had discarded so carelessly had been real, unconditional, and rare. The person she desperately needed wasn't Chief Kelechi or any of the wealthy men her former friends had paraded before her. It was the man who had sold his motorcycle and his savings simply because he believed in her dreams. She learned, through mutual acquaintances, that Emeka had not only rebuilt his life, but had flourished beyond anything either of them could have imagined during their years of struggle. He was remarried now to a kind woman who worked as a teacher, someone who had loved him before knowing about his wealth and continued loving him without needing it. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and from what she heard, their home was filled with the same warmth and laughter that had once defined her own marriage to him. Something inside her broke at that news, a desperate, irrational hope flickering despite everything logic told her. She found herself researching his address, driving past his neighborhood, gathering enough courage over weeks to finally approach the towering gates of his mansion on that rainy evening, ready to beg for a forgiveness she wasn't entirely sure she deserved. Which brought everything back to where this story began, Chiamaka standing in the rain, drenched and desperate, staring through iron gates at the family she had once been part of, now replaced by a woman who appreciated what Chiamaka had thrown away. "Please," she whispered again, her voice raw. "I was blind, Emeka. I let pride convince me that I deserved better than you, when the truth is I never deserved someone as good as you in the first place." Emeka studied her for a long moment, the rain plastering her hair against her face, mascara streaking down cheeks that used to light up every room she entered. He felt no satisfaction in her downfall, no desire for revenge despite everything she had put him through. "Success didn't destroy our marriage, Chiamaka," he finally said, his voice steady despite the storm raging between them. "Pride did. You let other people's opinions convince you that love wasn't enough, that the man who sacrificed everything for your dreams suddenly became unworthy once those dreams came true." "I know," she sobbed, gripping the iron bars as if they could somehow bridge the distance between them. "I know, and I'm so sorry." "I forgive you," he said softly, surprising her, "but forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what we lost. I have a family now, Chiamaka. A wife who loves me without needing me to change, children who deserve stability, not chaos from a past that's already closed." His wife appeared beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, her eyes holding no malice toward Chiamaka, only quiet compassion for a woman clearly suffering the consequences of choices made long ago. "I hope you find peace," Emeka added, his tone final but not unkind. "But that peace won't be found here." He turned, guiding his family back toward the warmth of their home, the gate slowly closing between them, sealing away any final hope Chiamaka had carried into that rainy night. She stood there long after the gate shut completely, rain mixing with tears she no longer tried to hide, the weight of every choice she had made crashing down with brutal clarity. The wealthy friends were gone. The luxury lifestyle was gone. The man who had loved her unconditionally was gone, replaced by a stranger who had every right to close that door forever. She turned and walked back toward her car, each step heavier than the last, carrying not just the rain's weight, but the unbearable burden of irreversible regret. Many people spend their lives chasing success, believing it will fill every emptiness, solve every problem, elevate them beyond the struggles that once defined them. But success without gratitude becomes a hollow victory, a beautiful house built on a foundation of betrayal. Chiamaka had everything money could buy, yet she lost the one thing money could never replace, a love that had asked for nothing in return except to be remembered. As her car disappeared into the rainy night, leaving behind the mansion and the family she could never reclaim, one truth remained clear: success is never truly dangerous on its own. It only becomes destructive when it convinces you to forget the very hands that lifted you up when nobody else believed you were worth lifting at all.